Start over. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many of you out today for such an important event. We're here because we want to be vocal, and it's vocal that's brought us out today. Vocal stands for Voices of Canadians About Lyme Disease. We are trying to raise our voices, raise awareness, whip up support from governments to take more action on what is rapidly becoming an epidemic in this country. Deer ticks are becoming more becoming, well, they're spreading. They're spreading rapidly into all kinds of areas, our parks, our grasslands, along beaches, and even into our lawns. And we have to make people aware of the risk that they're facing right now. Vocal is an organization that began last spring after a very important conference in May that tried to come up with a federal framework to raise awareness and action for Lyme disease. And after that conference was over, a lot of people felt that there was still a lot of awareness and a lot of work that had to be done in this country to bring Lyme disease and ticks to the forefront. And that's where Vocal was organized, and they have been very, very vocal in trying to get more action on Lyme disease in this country. We have an exciting day for you today. We've got politicians joining us today. We have musical performers, and a big thank you to Kelly Fleming and I can't remember the other girl's name, but I will find it. But thank you for the entertainers we're going to have here today. We've got artists, we've got authors, we've got researchers, we've got Lyme disease advocates. And in addition, we'd like to draw your attention to our Lyme Footwear Memorial. If you can take a look over here, we've got a lot of footwear, a collection of footwear that accompanying messages representing those who weren't able to attend today's event due to illness, because of lack of funds, or that they are sadly no longer with us. A very special thank you to all our sponsors today, especially Back to Health Wellness Centre, the Canadian Lyme Disease Foundation, and the Alt Hotel, and to those who donated via our GoFundMe page. Three of our original guests are unable to join us today: Curtis Coleman, Dr. Eva Sappi, and MP Karen Ludwig. We wish them all the best and thank them for their work towards furthering the cause of Lyme disease. My name is Carol Ann Meehan. I'm with 1310 News here in Ottawa. You might recognize the name from television a few years ago, but pardon? CTV Ottawa, CJOH. But I've been around the community for a long time. I'm currently with 1310 News, which I'm absolutely loving. I have a show on from 1 to 3 every day on radio. But the reason I'm here today is because I have become very familiar with the cause of Lyme disease over the last couple of years. In 2014, I met a young woman. She was a nurse at CHIO, in fact. And we attended a fundraiser, my former colleague and I, Max Keeping, to raise funds for Dawn Laverandre. And she is here today. I didn't know anything about Dawn's condition. I knew it was debilitating. It was causing her to lose neurological function and impeding her physical abilities. And it was Lyme disease that was the cause of Dawn's problems and her symptoms. And it took her a long time to be diagnosed. There wasn't much treatment. I believe Dawn and others who suffered had to go to the United States for treatment. But since that time, Lyme disease has actually exploded. I met Leslie Fleming through the course of my job at 1310, and Leslie told me the extent of the problem. I was just blown away by it. And I've been able to do a lot of interviews about it on my radio show, and I'd like to be part of the cause to raise it, heighten the awareness even more. So thank you very much for inviting me here today, Leslie. A couple of bit of housekeeping notes. There are washrooms. They're located behind the right of the West Block, okay? Also at 90 Wellington Street, the Ottawa Tourism Centre, both are accessible, we're happy to tell you. Jennifer, come on up.
Thanks, Caroline. Bonjour, je me nomme Jennifer et je suis co-coordonnatrice de cet événement avec Leslie Fleming. Au nom du comité de planification Vocal Ottawa, j'aimerais vous remercier aujourd'hui pour votre participation à cet événement très important. Vocal est l'acronyme pour les voix des Canadiens sur la maladie de Lyme. Vous venez d'entendre Kelly Fleming et Lara Croker, ils reviendront plus tard. Cet événement fut conçu au printemps dernier après la conférence en vue de l'élaboration d'un cadre fédéral relatif à la maladie de Lyme. Après cette conférence, plusieurs personnes se sont aperçues qu'il y a encore beaucoup de travail à faire, qu'il fallait continuer à sensibiliser les gens et les politiciens. Nous avons plusieurs invités passionnants aujourd'hui, y compris un mélange de politiciens, d'interprètes musicaux, de revendicateurs pour de meilleurs services, d'écrivains, d'artistes, de chercheurs et de médecins. De plus, j'aimerais attirer votre attention sur les souliers commémoratifs là-bas, avec des messages
bending, complex, debilitating do-it-yourself disease. After waiting years to have this disease recognized by the powers that be here in Canada, this first ever so-called framework leaves us with the unconscionable status quo, where thousands, if not tens of thousands, maybe more, of chronic Lyme disease sufferers are still being denied medical care here at home and must continue to go elsewhere for treatment. I'll wait.
And so the bell calls.
Yes, good timing. For those who cannot afford care outside of Canada, they must now continue to suffer in silence. Minister Philpott, I wish you were here to listen. This should be declared a national crisis. Instead, your announcement, your green ribbon, your so-called action plan are nothing more than optics, couched in evidence-based academic research rather than addressing the immediate needs of those suffering now. The unsuspecting public, and this is the really dangerous part, those yet not affected, but who will be one day soon, have no idea. They have no idea that they've been misled by Philpott and her government. They have no idea that chronic Lyme disease is a lifelong, incapacitating illness they can't get treatment for here at home. They have no idea that Lyme disease can be transmitted in a myriad of ways, in utero, via blood transfusion, organ donation, sexually, and by other insects. They have no idea, like we do, that chronic Lyme disease is a global medical holocaust where people world over, including right here in Canada, are sick and dying and at times taking their own lives because the suffering is just too much to bear. It won't be long before they too are standing up here on this podium or down there in the crowd, desperately needing to have their voices heard as well. All they know right now is that Lyme is caused by ticks. With your announcement, Minister Philpott, you have falsely assured the Canadian public that you are going to save the day and take care of this problem when nothing could be further from the truth. The announcement on Tuesday was a punch in the gut for those of us in the Lyme world who know better. Minister Philpott, optics are not going to heal the sick and infirm. You may have pulled the wool over the eyes of the unsuspecting public, but you cannot fool us. We know the truth, and it will be revealed. One day, Canadians will understand that you stonewalled us, hid behind closed doors, remained silent as my colleagues tried to present you with 40,000 petition signatures, 10,000 comments, and thousands of personal letters, all pleading for your help and asking for you to do the right thing. They will know, everyone will know, that you turned a blind eye while allowing us to consider that we have no medical care in a country that's supposed to take care of its own. How can you, Minister Philpott, a key public servant, Canada's public health leader, fail this public so miserably? What happened to the Canada Health Act or the Patient's Bill of Rights, legislation that promises universal, comprehensive, and accessible health care for all? We are chronic Lyme disease sufferers. Why are they exempt from the laws that guarantee all Canadians the right to be treated in an effective and a timely manner? How do you and your colleagues rationalize this do-nothing federal framework, a so-called action plan, which did not even include the most important stakeholders, the patients themselves? We don't sleep at night. The truth of our plight is so dark and so ugly, the only thing that keeps us afloat is one another. Knowing that we're not alone in this nightmare, Minister Philpott, how do you sleep at night? How do you do that knowing that desperately ill Canadians must continue to cross the border for diagnosis and treatment, that we must look for ways to get prescriptions filled in very creative ways, pay exorbitant fees out of pocket, bankrupting many, and giving others no choice but to go it alone, sick and dying without any medical care at all. If these were your sons and daughters, Minister Philpott, your mother, your father, your brothers and sisters, your dear friends, would you too not be horrified by this shameful state of affairs? We cannot and will not abide by this denial any longer. Every day, while navigating this illness, while having to be our own medical specialists, we are also forced to unpack the huge pack of lies driving this medical neglect. A web of lies that for decades now has put us on the defensive, to make matters worse, has made us appear to be the crazy ones. In my profession, as a therapist, that's called gaslighting, victimizing the victims by making them responsible, at fault, and wrong. As you continue to insist that chronic Lyme disease is a mere nuisance disease that is difficult to catch, easy to diagnose, and easy to treat, she says, as doctors across the country continue to systemically deny, ignore, negate, gaslight, and abandon the sick and infirm, as this pandemic continues to grow, and mark our words, it will, there'll be no turning back. You've made a grave error this week, Minister Philpott, and it will all come back to haunt us. When I'm referring to this, I am not referring to the lucky few who catch it in the early stages. Of course, that's not what we're talking about here. As you well know, the circumstances in which we are plunged down the medical rabbit hole is when we don't see the tick that bites us, when we don't get treated right away, when the infectious disease wreaks havoc on our immune system for months, years, and even decades on end. When I refer to chronic Lyme, I am describing a disabling, complex, multi-system, immunosuppressive, post-sepsis, B-cell, non-HIV AIDS caused by the outer surface protein A of a spirochete. It's a disease that literally obliterates your immune system and opens the floodgates to a myriad of opportunistic infections, co-infections, parasites, fungi, mold, retroviruses such as EBV. This is what we refer to as the chronic condition. This is what is wreaking havoc in the lives of millions, and this is what we're fighting to have recognized and treated. This is where the political chasm lies and the madness begins. Minister Philpott, chronic Lyme disease is a pandemic debilitating the lives of tens of thousands of Canadians from coast to coast. It's a global medical holocaust riddled with unimaginable pain, suffering, loss, and darkness. One that extends far beyond Canada, far beyond this continent, to 80 countries, every continent, millions of sufferers, all subject to the very same madness that we face here today. Make no mistake, Minister Philpott, you may not be listening, AMMI may not be listening, PHAC may not be listening, and doctors may not be listening, but we will be heard. We will be heard. And the reason we'll be heard is because Lyme and Lyme madness is about the power of community, like all of us here today. We can get treated far better by one another than most doctors across the country, so we band together, and it's our collective knowing, it's our strength in numbers, it's our united message, our strategic and measured actions that will ultimately transform this dark night of the soul into light and hope for millions around the world. Until we effect meaningful change, chronic Lyme disease remains the quintessential hero's journey, because it is here in Lymeland that we are put to the ultimate test, pushed to points of crisis, forced to confront the scariest things imaginable, and most often alone until we connect with one another. It is here that we're made to feel like a stranger in a strange land, one that is isolating and very unfamiliar. It is here that we must dig deep and find our courage, our patience, our faith, and our inner strength. It is here that we are thrust into a place that requires us to traverse the darkest of tunnels. And it is here that we are tried and tired beyond our limits, stretched beyond what we ever could have imagined, only to eventually, without help from mainstream medicine, transmute our fear into courage, our outrage into action, chaos into order, hopelessness into hopefulness, darkness into light. Chronic Lyme disease forces us to take a hero's journey as we face a crisis of mind, body, and soul, and must rely upon ourselves and the very few doctors out there to help. What is remarkable about the human spirit is that this transformational encounter, while painful, overwhelming, and terrifying, can also provide hope. There's hope through our healing, hope through our connection, hope through creative and political actions. But of course, this is no easy feat, and every day I read, hear, and see things with my own eyes that still has me shaking my head every single day, even after taking up residence in Limeland many years ago. You see, Lyme sufferers, we realize, are the untouchables, and as someone cleverly said, the expendables. We're modern-day lepers, isolated in our own homes and left for dead by a medical system that is in full denial. We are collateral damage created by a medical establishment driven by profit and greed and not by public good. In this world of untouchables, doctors mock you, emergency rooms send you home without care, and specialists tell you it's all in your head. Limeland is a dark, ugly place where our political leaders, doctors, and even friends sometimes abandon us. Our stories are eerily similar, give or take a detail or two, and we are all told the same thing. So doctors, it's time to wake up. Welcome to a pandemic that you've actually missed due to your lack of education, your arrogance, your willful neglect. Like so many here on Parliament Hill today, I speak out because I'm driven by outrage at the widespread medical injustice that we face. As the mother of an adult chronic Lyme sufferer, as the author of Lyme Madness, as an accidental activist and a psychotherapist, I'm fueled daily by the outrageous, subhuman treatment that we have experienced along with so many others across the globe. I find it intolerable that we have to fight for our human rights, that our basic human rights are just not a given. For those who may find that this medical travesty we experience is really hard to believe, and some days I still shake my head, all we have to do is research the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Remember the nightmare that befell the AIDS community. Then perhaps it won't be so hard to believe what our medical system, our pharma companies, and our politicians are capable of. The human suffering that I've witnessed in these past few years is more than I ever could have imagined. If I could only unhear and unlearn and unsee all that I have seen and known and heard, that would be great, but that's not going to happen. The essence of Lyme Madness is beyond a horrifying tale. It's highly politicized, pervasively denied, where politics are even more parasitic than the illness itself. This is a story about men, women, teens, and children living right next door, many of whom are dying a slow and torturous death for years and even decades, while doctors everywhere turn their backs. This is a story of unimaginable widespread human suffering, political corruption, white-collar crimes, backroom deals, greed, ego, control, power, suppression, oppression, concealment, whistleblowers, and yes, conspiracies too. It's a story about marginalization, misappropriation of funds, of government funds, patent ownership, conflicts of interest, scientific fraud, publication bias, outright denial, faulty testing, obfuscation, and gaslighting. It's a story where sufferers get treated more humanely by all of us on Facebook than we do in most doctors' offices. It's a tragic account of the medical system blaming the sufferer, accusing you of making it up, of not really being sick, as they offer such platitudes as, go get some exercise or fresh air, take up a new hobby, maybe you're just stressed, as solutions to what might ail you, rather than digging deeply into the medical root cause driving the myriad of persistent symptoms. As writer and political activist Elie Wiesel said, there may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. He also said human suffering anywhere concerns men and women everywhere, and so here we are. Here we are, standing tall, speaking out, being brave, being voices for the voiceless, not willing to tolerate the injustice that we face. How can it be that millions are suffering from this hideous, devastating disease while mainstream medicine continues to insist that it doesn't even exist? How can it be that so many people are so sick, homebound, bedbound, in wheelchairs, on feeding tubes, and they can't get diagnosed or treated properly? How can it be that so many people face such unspeakable loss of health, loss of the person they once were, loss of independence, dreams and goals, missed opportunities, loss of the life they once had, loss of identity and self-esteem, loss of employment, loss of a future, and the list goes on. And yet, so few in mainstream medicine seem to care at all. How can it be that doctors have lost or are afraid of losing their practice, their livelihood, and their license for treating an illness that apparently doesn't exist? Doctors who say it's your family or mine, and I want to protect mine, so I can't treat you. And that was actually said a couple of weeks ago at a hospital in Toronto. How could it be that a whistleblower, a US whistleblower, was committed to a psych ward and robbed of her children because she told the truth about a vaccine called Limerix some 20 years ago? This story is a 40-year war. It's a long, arduous battle with so many casualties and warriors like all of us inducted without a choice. It's a reality that has forever changed my adult son and one that has forever changed me. The greatest madness of all is that mainstream medicine continues to insist that this is just a delusion, that it's all in your head. They say you have somatoform disorder, hypochondria, factitious disorder, Munchausen's. Please know that if one day it turns out that the medical system finally acknowledges this illness and decides to come out of its widely entrenched, inhumane denial, we will still be shell-shocked, people will still be sick and suffering, but we may finally have more doctors to rely on so we can stop having to expend our own energy being our own sleuths, our own doctors, our own microbiologists, and medical researchers. And when that day finally does come to pass, please know that we won't actually care what the medical community calls this disease as long as it reflects the truth of what it is and as long as we get the help we need. So call it chronic Lyme, call it post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome, call it MSIDS. Just base your conclusions on honest research and find us a cure for this illness, an illness that is very, very difficult to cure because we aren't getting the support we need. So Minister Philpott, hear our cries. What our community expects of doctors here in Canada and around the world is to stop sick-shaming their parents and patients and start listening. This deeply entrenched denial of chronic Lyme disease, driven by perverse falsehoods disseminated by mainstream medicine long ago, is the root of the madness and the very reason that we are victimized in so many ways. Victimized by the disease itself, by doctors who turn their backs, by loved ones who roll their eyes and walk away, by insurance companies who refuse to provide coverage, by the CDC and the IDSA who together insist that chronic Lyme disease does not exist, by politicians who blindly follow the rhetoric and the party line. When you listen to the deniers of this disease, and there are plenty of them world over, deniers who make you question your sanity, your reality, your symptoms, and your illness, ask yourself this: is it really possible that millions of once healthy, active individuals the world over are faking their illness, suffering beyond the pale, and are participating in some kind of mass delusion? Is it really possible that they are pretending to be sick because they have no better life plan than to become housebound, infirm, isolated, and penniless, and looking for some kind of perverse attention with no perceivable payoff? It is this pervasive denial, the injustices we face, that drove me to write Lyme Madness so the world can understand what we were forced to experience, and to caution those not yet affected so that they and their loved ones will know what to do, because they surely will be next otherwise. The true madness lies not within the sufferers, but in all the denial, and the madness has to stop. And I believe it will, but only, and I mean only, when the rest of the world becomes as outraged as we are, outraged at a medical system that has failed this ever-growing community and must do better. In the meantime, we will all keep talking, writing, educating, protesting, petitioning, fighting, and disseminating the truth, while continuing to let the light seep in through the cracks until one day this medical travesty transforms into the most extraordinary of human triumphs. The truth will be heard, justice will be served, and that day will come soon. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Laurie Dennis. She is a Lyme sufferer. She's the author of Lyme Madness. Look for her book right over here to my right. And now a Lyme activist. Thank you, Laurie.
My daughter, Bronwyn, has suffered from Lyme and co-infections for over 21 years. We spent years addressing health issues in emergency rooms and specialists' offices, being told that they don't know why such a young girl or woman has so many health problems. She was only 9 when she returned from a Girl Guide camp with bug bites all over her body, many the size of baseballs. We were told she was allergic to mosquitoes and black flies. Ticks were not even on the radar back then. It was then that migraines came out of nowhere with no family history, learning difficulties, repeated sinus infections, ear infections, mono at the age of 12 years old, eating issues, horrible abdominal cramping. One hospital in Montreal removed her appendix, a healthy appendix, thinking that that was what was causing her pain. Bronwyn lost 8 teeth because she was constantly fighting mouth infections. Not once in all of the years that she was in Canada did any doctor take the initiative to find out why this young woman was always so sick. The devastation of this disease has left her body completely broken. There is not one organ untouched. It was when Bronwyn married an American, Max, 6 years ago that we found out what plagued her. 3 days after their civil wedding, Bronwyn woke up paralyzed in both legs after weeks of complaining of severe back pain. 9 months later, Bronwyn was tested and found positive for Lyme disease and 32 co-infections. Her body has become a cesspool of bacteria from years of neglect here in Canada and by the Canadian healthcare system. And it is no easier, I might add, for Americans to get treatment for Lyme disease than Canadians. Although the irony is most Canadians are forced over the border to seek the treatment from LLMDs, which are Lyme literate doctors, in the United States, those very same doctors are undercover when it comes to treating their own citizens for fear of losing their medical license. Too often, Bronwyn received letters from LLMDs who were treating her Lyme, stating that they could no longer retain her as a patient, wishing her luck in her future, without any further explanation. Too often, Lyme patients are abandoned by medical doctors everywhere. This is a global problem. The Hippocratic oath to do no harm is furthest from the truth of actions today. For Bronwyn, there is no cure. The darker realities of Lyme disease is what our family is living with. We have been told over and over that she is beyond medical knowledge. She has no stomach now, is tube fed, her heart has problems. As I said, no major organ has been unaffected. So in response to our helplessness and a need to break some of the medical boundaries and make this disease human, we formed Drawing Lyme Out Loud, a way to tell the stories of the others in very visual and visceral ways. Yes, it's dark art. That is because we are exposing the human emotions that come along with this pandemic. We are giving a voice to those who have become too weak to tell you how they feel. They may look good on the outside, but that is because they are showing you their dignity. It is not how they feel inside. So the artwork that you see wandering around has stories from many different Lyme sufferers, not just my daughter. It is not isolated art. It is art that is speaking to how we... I have also done a charcoal of Matt, her son, for Lori, and I'm giving it to her in public today. So this one is called Imprisoned, because Lyme disease just puts you in all kinds of prisons. Social, in terms of your careers, work, family, and your body, and all of the emotions.
Lori, Donna, stand together for a second.
Oh, a photo op. Sorry, guys. I know we're on a time schedule.
All right. One more. Beautiful. Thank you.
And now I'm going to read one of my poems, and I've paired it with Muted, because many Lyme disease patients are muted within the healthcare system and in their doctor's offices. The tick that never was. The legend goes like this. If you know you were bit by a tick, no bigger than the head of a pin, found it on your person somewhere, peeking its bum out in the air, head burrowed deep inside, its gourmet buffet your blood. If you see a dartboard pattern reddening of skin, they call it a bullseye's rash that appears around a very tiny lump. Then it is very serious, and you must get treated. What happens, though, when you don't know you were bit by a tick, no bigger than the head of a pin? You didn't find it anywhere, hiding on your skin. They say it goes away because you didn't know. But don't miss the treatments if you do know, because this disease can kill you, only if you know.
Thank you. Everybody will have to bear with me. I am not a public speaker by any means. Through high school, politics, and public speaking were the things I hated the most. And look where I am. I was bitten by a tick back in 2008. I had pulled the tick out of my leg and threw it away. About a week later, I had a bullseye rash on my leg, and I had no idea what it was from. I figured it was an allergic reaction, as I always had allergic reaction to bugs bites. So I left it. I started to get ill. I got very ill. I ended up with constant migraines, hip pain, joint pain. I had intestinal problems. I went from doctor to doctor. I started with blood pressure problems, skyrocketed. They rocked me to another specialist office thinking I was on the verge of a stroke. My blood pressure was at 240 over 120. I got very ill, and I went to my doctor after researching and going to specialists. And I went to my doctor and says, oh my God, I was bitten by a tick. She says, are you sure? I pulled out a picture I had taken of my circle rash, and I showed it to her, and she says, I think you might have Lyme disease. So she tested me, but our Canadian testing is garbage. It is garbage. You will be lucky if 30% of patients get a positive test in Canada. And when they do get that positive test, they're told it's a false positive. So when my doctor said to me it was negative, I believed her. I wasn't dealing with Lyme disease. So for the next 2 years, I went from specialist to specialist. And then I found more information on the internet. I found Dr. Angela Lee, a naturopath, who was treating Lyme disease. She had 7 patients. I was one of her 7 when she started treating us. Dr. Angela Lee is now on the board of directors for Lyme Ontario, and her practice is Lyme patients only. Back then, she sent my blood to iGenetics. It came back positive. I had Lyme disease. I also had 4 co-infections. Then I had to find a doctor. That was a whole other ballgame. I thought for sure when I had a diagnosis that I had an answer. But when I started trying to find a doctor, it was unbelievable. I finally found an infectious disease doctor, and I believe I'm the only person in all of Canada or Ontario to get 3 months of IB antibiotics from an infectious disease doctor. The whole time, him telling me he didn't believe I had Lyme disease and that my United States tests were false positives. I didn't have it. But he was appeasing me, and the placebo effect was working. I took whatever he had and ran with it and said, fine. This is back then, it was 2014, I was finally diagnosed. And this is when I met up with people on the internet in support groups, and I found Lyme Ontario. Lyme Ontario started back in 1990. It was started by John and Kit Scott, who are still members of our board today. They started it in 1990 in a small room in Fergus in a church. It became a registered charity in 1991. At the time, there were 7 people, including John and Kit. It was called Lyme Borealis Support Group of Ontario. It later changed its name to Lyme Disease Association of Ontario, and we are now known as Lyme Ontario. John and Kit ran Lyme Ontario back then. They had a few board members that did public awareness, publicity, they had a vice president, and they had a medical advisor who was the late Dr. Philip Williams. Over the years, Lyme Ontario grew quickly. In the year 2000, they were up to 100 members. They had published 4 newsletters a year, and it was sent out by snail mail back then. They had meetings 4 times a year in Southern Ontario. John, to this day, has published 35 peer-reviewed articles on ticks and Lyme that have been published in Canada. In 2014, we really grew. Ellen Hose took on as president. I came in as vice president. Tony Rabano came in as our treasurer. And we had Bev and Jack Albers also join as our fundraisers and event coordinators. We meet quarterly. Angela Lee is now our medical advisor. We meet quarterly, and as of June of this year, we had 2,010 members in our database that we send out monthly newsletters to on Lyme disease. And since January of this year, we have answered over 700 emails of people asking for help and where to find doctors. We continue to work with the government on a provincial level. All of our 3 members of our board last year attended the conference here for the Framework for Change. The shirt I am wearing today is full of Canadian names that could not be there for the framework or could not be here today due to illness or being too far away. We have had an annual walk. This was our 2nd year this year. Last year we had approximately 200 people. This year we had 400 patients show up. We do awareness as much as we can. We attended this year the Toronto Outdoor Show and the Cottage Life Show this fall. We are on social media, we are active on Facebook, you'll find us on Twitter. If you need help, contact Lyme Ontario and we'll do our best. Thank you.
They wanted to squeeze her in, but I took a squeeze anyway. I think, do I need to introduce her? Leader of the Green Party, Elizabeth May, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Merci tout le monde. What a great turnout. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your continued hard work, advocacy, and courage in dealing with the threat of Lyme disease. We're still in the struggle to get the action we need, but I hope you won't be mad at me for feeling this way about it. I do feel as though from the awful, unacceptable draft framework to the one that ultimately came out, we could take a glass half full, glass half empty approach. I've decided to take the glass half full and say, look, here are the pieces that we can work on. We've been told that the federal framework now includes the increase of public education and awareness, but this is the part I really like, but also a campaign and a federal commitment to educate physicians. So that key piece is an ongoing commitment, but we don't know the details. How do they plan to educate physicians? What do we do to make sure that that piece is pursued as quickly as possible? We know $4 million for Lyme research won't be enough, but it's $4 million more than we had last week. But where's it going to go? Can we play a role in finding out where it's targeted, where that research funding goes? What do we do to ensure, and this is to me our goal that needs to be in big letters everywhere, and it's in front of my face all the time. I keep thinking, we need to ensure that every Canadian who gets Lyme disease can get effective treatment in Canada. That's my goal. It's one that will take provincial departments of health, the federal Department of Health, and medical societies to come up to speed to the reality of Lyme disease in the 21st century. Some people are still, whenever they got their medical training, I believe it was in the 20th century, it might have been the 19th century, but I do think it was in the 20th century. They're not with us yet. They don't understand what we're dealing with. But we know we're going to be seeing more Lyme disease year on year, and we need to be prepared. We need to ensure that people are practicing prevention, and we need to make sure that when people are exposed to these bacteria and they become ill, they can get swift diagnosis and treatment in Canada. So it's an ongoing struggle. I won't for 1 minute say we can now declare victory. We got the federal framework, so we're done. We got the federal framework. We're just beginning. Thank you so much for your work. I'm super grateful for all of you. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce now a local Ottawa band. Joel Elliott has been making music and performing for several years in and around the Capital Region. Joel is a member of the Event Planning Committee, and I have to say his mother lives with Lyme disease. He's got 2 reasons to be here today. Joel Elliott, Jumpin' Joel Flash, and the Magic Machine. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hello. Hello.
Thanks for having us, everybody.
Oh, you are not. You're not on.
I'm not on.
There you are.
Oh, there I am. Thanks for having us, everybody. I've never been bumped for a federal party leave before. It's a wonderful experience. Thank you, everybody. We're Jumpin' Joel Flash, that's me, and the Magic Machine. There's more of us, but this is the Magic Machine today. This is Zoe and Robin. Say hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Hi, guys. I'm here supporting my mother, Sally, who's suffering from Lyme disease, and it's great to see so many people here in support of her and others like her. Please enjoy this next song. could run away. And I'll never be the same as long as you keep hanging round my heart again.
Round my heart again.
Round my heart again.
Round my heart again.
Mistake. You made a promise to me and I saw you break it. We've never been apart, it feels so long this time. And I don't wanna see you coming round my heart again.
Round my heart again.
Round my heart again.
Round my heart again.
You let me in, then you broke my heart again.
Broke my heart again.
You left me barely standing. Way back in. Why won't you let me in? You hide behind the veil of purity and sin. And I don't have to pray to say you don't want me. The door will be unlocked when you come round my heart again. Thanks, gang. In the interest of time, we're just going to keep right on going, but I hope you guys are all comfortable out there, here to support and fight Lyme. Give us a yeah!
Yeah! Yeah!
Holy, that was right on.
Enthusiasm.
It was doozy. Here's a song that sounds sad, but I hope you love it. Go whining again, hand on the wheel with my head in the sand, and I'm searching the highway for you. Locked up my feelings and ran. I'm out on my own, and I don't have a plan, but I can't sit around just waiting on memory. Ooh, you still got me, babe, I ain't got you. You still got me, babe, I ain't got you. Go smiling again, remembering times when you still held my hand, and I wonder what makes you smile as much as I do. You don't know how sorry I am. You can't hear me scream, but I don't give a damn. I yell at this guy, and crowd got wild. You still got me now, baby. me, baby. You still got me, baby. I got you. Left my home angry this morning. Just don't know where it is I'm going to. Left my home angry this morning. Just don't know where it is I'm going to. You still got me now, baby. Whoa, 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 you still got me, baby. You still got me, baby. But I got you. Thanks, friends. We got one more song left. Does anyone out there named Eleanor? Anybody? One day.
One day.
One day.
It's never happened yet.
Not yet. This one's for Eleanor. You don't have to worry about me anymore. You sailed off in a hurry and left me all alone on the shore. You left me behind. Oh, and I lost my life, darling. I'm lonely, my only, my sweet Eleanor. I'm trapped in my own mind, and you got the key to the door. Look fine on the outside, but here I'm tired of the walk. I can't say goodbye. Knows that I've tried.
Driving along in the streets of Ontario.
Darling, I'm lonely, my only, my sweet Eleanor.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Leslie, for arranging it. And I don't know how you guys manage, but I feel like we're the least controversial group here today. But in all honesty, we're here to talk about Lyme disease, and each and every one of us has a reason to be here. Whether you are the one who's suffering from it, or you have family members that you're supporting, or you're a healthcare professional who is treating Lyme, we're obviously all affected by it. We no longer are able to ignore this pandemic because there are millions of people in this country and around the world who are suffering, and it's now becoming really a human rights issue. We are actually not here to talk about the Lyme disease that can cause a little headache, or the Lyme disease that cause a little joint pain, or some fevers, or a little fatigue, or a rash. We're not here to talk about the Lyme disease that gets treated and cured in 2 to 3 weeks, or better yet, treated and cured without any medication or treatment at all. We're actually here to talk about the Lyme disease that can cause a collection of infections, unrelenting inflammation throughout your body, and an abnormal immune response that's taxing on your immune system and often develops an autoimmune phenomenon. So it's really a collection of infections, inflammation, and an autoimmune response that can cause the Lyme disease that we're here talking about today. Unreliable testing that provide false sense of security to both patients and physicians, as well as low level of suspicion and understanding of the complexity of the disease makes it very difficult to diagnose and difficult to treat. Most Canadians come to their physicians with late-stage symptoms when it can present and mimic multiple neurologic and other conditions. And specifically, since I'm a neurologist, I'd like to touch on a few of the neurologic symptoms. So neurodevelopmental problems in children ages 5 to 14, who are one of the most affected groups in this population, which is learning disabilities, autism-type symptoms, behavioral problems, and the explosion of ADD and ADHD across the world. I'm saying that a significant portion of these people most likely have infections and an infection-induced autoimmune encephalitis that's causing these symptoms, and therefore needs to be treated not symptomatically, but treated with the underlying medical problem. Neurodegenerative disorders that you've all known and heard of, MS, ALS, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, and various dementias. We've had an explosion of Alzheimer's and dementias in the last 30 to 40 years in North America. Why is that going on? Perhaps not 100% of these patients have infections, but a significant part of them do. And is it even possible to consider that potentially these conditions can be reversible? Neuropsychiatric problems such as anxiety, depression, paranoia, mood disorders, thought disorders. 1 of 5 people across the world are on psychotropic medications. Recent studies come out saying that up to 50% of patients who have in-hospital psychiatric hospitalizations have autoimmune disorders, and infections-induced autoimmune encephalitis can trigger that. Of course, as well as various other neuropathies, pain syndromes, and involvement of other organ systems that were talked about here today. Talking about better testing and treatment is very, very important. But what change can we bring on to start today and right now? Well, we have to talk about protection. Protecting your yard. 90% of patients get an insect bite in doing such high-risk activity as playing in their yard. So you need to protect your yard. You need to protect your pets, not only so that they don't get Lyme disease, but they can carry these insects into your home, and you need to protect your family from them. And of course, protecting yourselves. As someone else mentioned, I'm also on social media raising awareness through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can go to my website, elenafreedmd.com, to learn more about protection, where it has a lot of good information and websites that are educational. Early detection is key for this disease. Start thinking a systemic illness in someone who has developed multiple odd symptoms that are puzzling their physician and is very difficult to treat with mainstream medical protocols. Second, know that the testing is unreliable, and so the healthcare professional should be relying more on history taking and their clinical judgment, just like in the olden days. Recheck your test. So recheck your tests because, as we all know, just because you tested negative doesn't mean that you don't have Lyme disease, and often retesting may provide more information to the physician and to the patient. And when in doubt, treat. Because if we start waiting for late-stage symptoms, such as neurologic, cardiologic, and beyond, often treatment can be very complicated and very prolonged. Like I said at the beginning of my talk, this is a human rights issue. There are millions of people who are suffering and in pain in this country and around the world. And in the words of Dr. Charles Ray Jones, who says, if we continue to ignore this pandemic, we will create a generation of people who will never achieve their genetic potential and will become a burden to the state. Now that you all know this, it is each and every one of our responsibility to educate those around us and call for change. Thank you so much.